Thank you so much. Have a great school year.
Open a book. And you can be. Anything you want to be.
I was really motivated by some research that came out of the National Institute of Health that said that 95% of children have the cognitive ability to read fluently. I mean, it's 95%. And then within those numbers, you can look at 30% that are going to learn to read no matter how you teach them. Probably 5 of those 30 don't even need you to teach them. But the rest, they really need a different approach. And that could be because of dyslexia, but it also could be because of anxiety, depression. They could be English language learners that need reading instruction that's much more explicit. And then you also have kids that have really traumatic backgrounds. All of this is affecting the brain and affecting your availability to learn.
Like many of these journeys, for me, this was an accidental journey that started with my son, who was diagnosed as a dyslexic learner. And we were lucky because from that diagnosis, we sent him to a school that specializes in dyslexic learners, the Charles Armstrong School, which is in the Bay Area. And out of that experience, I ended up as president of the school board, and I realized that while we were doing a really good job with our kids, all of us on the board knew that most kids were not lucky enough to get that kind of education. And I also realized that there was a bigger problem here, that we didn't seem to be getting to the core of the issues. And so I came up with this very simple question: where is this dyslexia thing in the brain? Because I knew that we were dealing with what comes out of the brain, the behaviors, but nobody could tell me, for example, where is that processing circuit in the brain? And so I went to UCSF and I just asked them that simple question. I said, I think we should start a dyslexia center. I think it should be a national center, and got very lucky. I happened to connect with global leaders in neuroscience, and that in and of itself fascinated them.
We can learn so much about how these networks develop, and in many different ways, and in neurotypical individuals with learning differences, and we should use all the science that we have to work together. Reading and writing are new skills for the human brain in the evolutionary sense. We've been reading and writing only for a few thousand years, while we've been using oral language and speech for a few 100,000 years. So perceiving faces, speaking, are networks that are probably genetically ingrained by now. They can be more or less efficient, but they're genetically ingrained, while reading and writing in most people are acquired. They need to be taught. And if they're not taught properly with a systematic approach, they'll never become automatic readers with the fluency that we need in today's world.
By understanding the root cause in the brain and understanding how the brain actually works, we have the ability to change how we think about education. And the way education was thought of as one size fits all. We would teach kids a particular way, which we still do in schools mostly. But now what we know is that there are a lot of different brains who think very differently. And so with that knowledge, it really changes the way you think about how we structure school, how the role of the teachers, the role of the parents. It really changes everything.
Structured literacy is a structured approach to learning to read and write. It's systematic, it is explicit, and it's diagnostic. So therefore, there's this logical order to teaching reading, starting with the foundational skills of decoding and encoding, and then you're building to morphology, vocabulary, the meaning of words, and then higher literacy skills of reading comprehension and written expression. Everyone here is looking forward to hearing the background and the science. Like, sometimes we ask what the phenotype is, and this team isn't necessarily aware of what phenotypes are.
It's really an approach to understanding a person, or at least an aspect of the person. We want to look at how the person presents in a cognitive way and try to work backwards into how we think that relates to brain functioning and structure. And so these are 3 different kids, all with dyslexia, and they all have really strong nonverbal reasoning. So they're really bright kids. These are like a lot of the kids that you have at Chartwell. And you can see they score very different on phonology. The phenotyping is also trying to address the question of how do you work with each of these different profiles? When someone comes in with dyslexia, that's not necessarily qualitatively describing who they are or how they think.
I was familiar with the science of reading, but had never heard of it implemented in this way, right? So I would receive personally intervention one-on-one, right? It was never in a school setting done in this way. I thought that it was mind-blowing, right? That we could impact and understand our students' brains, then work with our teachers to help them to understand how to better teach them and bring the families in so that it can also improve their interactions with their child. Over the last few years, Jody Amiditz, our Director of Teaching and Learning, has continued to build that relationship. Although the focus had been on specifically dyslexia and looking at the brain through that avenue, we're now looking at math intervention and writing intervention and the social emotional component, so that we're looking at the entirety of the child with many different associated learning differences, and then looking at programming both from the academic as well as the strength-based education to ensure that the students are able to thrive and succeed at their utmost potential.
All right, what's your first step?
What tells you bring here?
Okay, so Ryan is boxing a suffix, underlined is vowel. What sound is your A gonna make? Good.
Tiger words were VCV, weren't they? Are camel words also VCV?
Yep, yeah.
Yeah, they are.
65% of students need direct, explicit instruction in phonics in order to be able to learn to read. In first grade, it looks like many students are able to read because they are good at memorizing words, and they've memorized many of the words on the page in, say, a first grade reader. But then when the volume of the text increases in second and third grade, they don't have the strategies to decode multisyllabic words that they've never seen before. It's possible to learn to read after third grade, but it is much more difficult if students don't learn when they're early on.
I didn't really think I could read. As I was going through and learning structured literacy and everything, I was like, oh, I can read some of these more tougher words. Especially the first word I was very proud of me learning was how to actually spell doctor correctly. I was very excited when I was able to learn to spell that word.
I have ADHD like the other school. I loved my other school, Monte Vista. It's always been my home, but I really felt like I didn't really belong, so I just didn't really learn that much here. But here my brain just it teaches us how to work with our brain and taught me how to learn more with ADHD.
Big thanks to my mom and my grandma for always being there supporting me, and even on the hard days pushing me through and helping me know that I'm capable of doing whatever I want to do.
These kids offer a very large risk reward in terms of whether they're getting what they need. If they are, we know that we have a lot of successful business people, a lot of engineers, a lot of artists, a lot of creatives that learn differently and have these incredible strengths, but they didn't necessarily do great in school. And we're finding also from UCSF that there are these circuits in the brain that are very, very connected, and if one has a lot of strength, the other end of that circuit has got to be a bit deactivated to allow for that strength. So one way of thinking about it is that these brains are optimized for different things. So we really need to not be throwing away these brains. We need to actually embrace them and give them what they need to fulfill themselves, but to contribute to society.
I was never diagnosed with anything, with dyslexia, but it's clear to me that I have something like this, because even to this day, when I get a phone number or something like this, I have to read it, forward and then read it backwards. I figured out these ways to do it, or go through each number, credit card numbers, anything like this. I have to do, and I struggle with things like spelling. To this day are problematic for me. Good thing there's spell check, and it fixed my world. So when I was small, a young child, I really struggled at school and early in reading. Caused a lot of frustration in the house. And then when I was in first grade, they had me redo first grade. But I knew I was smart, I struggled through it. I was in sort of low reading classes or getting extra help and things like that. But then I would score really high on the statewide testing, to the point that when I got to middle school, they didn't really look at my grades or talk to the teachers. They just looked at the testing, and they put me up in sort of a gifted program for language arts and high math and high science and all this kind of advanced classes. But I still struggled with it. I didn't, just reading was not something that came easy to me. On those statewide testing, so I would score, in the top few percentile or whatever it was for math and for verbal, but on things like spelling. So I would be, the scores would be 95%, 97%, 98%, whatever, and then spelling 10%. I was, way down, and I just couldn't figure these things out. And by the time I got to high school, I just didn't care. My high school report cards are atrocious. By the time I got to junior, senior year, it's F's and D's, and some classes would just be incomplete because I just didn't show up. I would be walking to school and I would go get a cup of coffee and not go to the first period or not care, so then I could get in trouble in school. This is what school was like for me. My father sort of decided, listen, you're not obviously committed to this, and I'm not going to spend money for you to, go off and go to college. Not that that was going to be much of an option for me anyway, considering my grades. And he made it very clear that he thinks it's good for me to get off on my own. And so my senior year of high school, I decided, okay, I'm getting out of here, and I joined the Navy.
My name is Courtney Weinbaum. I'm a senior researcher at the RAND Corporation, and at RAND I focus on national security programs. RAND is a think tank. It's a federally funded research center. We focus on policy research across all areas of public policy, and my area of expertise is national security, and that's how I got into this subject. And so I conducted a study. I led a team that researched what is the role of neurodiversity in national security, what should the role be, what are the benefits of it, what are the disadvantages and advantages of it, and what are the hurdles. And we really found that there's a lack of research, a lack of data, and a lack of awareness on what neurodiversity means and why the national security community, or honestly many other communities, can benefit from it. The conversation that I try and have is say, this is adding new ways of thinking to really difficult problems. And if national security is dealing with the most complex, wicked problems there are, why wouldn't you want all brain types doing that? Why wouldn't you? Why wouldn't you want every type of brain? One of the people I interviewed for my study was a senior intelligence officer. And she said, I'll never forget this, she said, when people say they want employees who think outside the box, what they really mean is they want people who think in a slightly bigger box. And that's the mindset we see is, well, we want people who think differently than the people here, but only a few inches differently. We don't want the really wild thinkers. And I always push back and say, why not? I think that's exactly what we need. That's the kind of creative thinking and diversity of thought that we absolutely need tackling national security problems.
So I said, I'm going to enlist into the Navy. I did well again on the aptitude test, so I actually got picked up in a very good program. I was a cryptologist. I was a code breaker for the National Security Agency. And while I was on active duty, I spent 4 years on active duty, and while I was there, I would take night classes. I would sign up for local junior colleges or whatever. And for whatever reason, things just started clicking. And I realized I can do this fairly simply. And so I got out after my 4 years, and I said, okay, I'm going to go to college. And then in the Navy, the officer said, to college. So I thought college was going to be something very difficult and something that separates you. When I got there, it was simple. My last year, I took something like 56 credits and had one of the highest GPAs in the whole school. I went on, I did a master's degree, and then eventually I was accepted to a PhD program, with a full fellowship and everything at University of Princeton University. I finished it. I went on and did a postdoc at University of Pennsylvania for 3 years, and then came out here, where I am a university professor, and I write books, and and my family was shocked, that this turn of events occurred, and they would say, we weren't quite sure what was going to happen with you, and but certainly not this.
Talking about strengths and weaknesses of different networks in the brain, I think the era of one researcher or one clinician that only focuses on dyslexia, it's kind of over. We really need multidisciplinary team. And the way that the center is organized at UCSF is that we have a core team that does a comprehensive evaluation that includes language testing, cognitive testing, MRIs, genetic analyses, and then we have different researchers or clinicians that participate in the study that really focus on something specific that is their own expertise.
At the UCSF Dyslexia Center, participants come in for a variety of neuroimaging. Here we have a 3 Tesla MRI called a Prisma. What we do is we bring participants in, we introduce them to the room, we show them a little bit about what they're going to be doing, including several games that they might be playing inside the scanner. While they're playing those games, we're measuring what their brain activity is doing. That's called a functional scan. So we're measuring what the brain is doing, where blood is flowing in the brain. These are a measurement specifically of those white matter connections. So they're pathways connecting different parts of the brain. One of the areas that we think is particularly interesting for dyslexia is called the visual word form area. This anatomy is theoretically responsible for the ability to recognize words, sight recognition of real words. So what we'll do is we'll show participants real words and fake words, and then compare the contrast between what's happening in their brain when they see those two different things. We have other different networks in the brain that are responsible for different types of learning, different types of functions. But as you can see, language, just like the brain, is very complex. It's not just one region of the brain that's associated with all of it. It's a symphony of different parts of the brain reacting together in different ways. So something can be different in someone's brain at any one of these parts and affect the whole system. That's why we think it's more of a network hypothesis, where historically we might say this part of the brain is responsible for just this, but now we think it's much more complex than that. The brain is full of connections and full of different pathways that might be affected in a variety of different ways.
You need to build those neural pathways that will connect looking at the letters to knowing the sounds to building the meaning of words. And if we don't build those pathways, students will struggle.
We have a great emphasis in the neurology department at UCSF in studying not just cognitive functions, but also emotions and social interactions. And this is one of the ways in which we discovered that some children with dyslexia have enhanced emotional processing. And that can be a strength. We often hear from adults that their dyslexics are team players and they bring people together. They really get people on a personal level. But for children, it can also be a point of weakness in the sense that it can make them more sensitive to anxiety and depression.
My name's Alex, and I'm one of the research coordinators here at UCSF. I work with neuropsychologist Dr. Virginia Sturm, and what we do is we study emotions and social behavior. So really what that means is we have kids come in, and so we have kids come in that are neurotypical, and we have kids with dyslexia that come into our lab, and we do a pretty long battery with them. So what we do is we show them videos that are attempting to elicit different emotions, such as sadness, amusement, and disgust. And really, we just want to see how they react to these videos. And so the way we measure this is by psychophysiology. So what we do is we attach different sensors to their body that will measure things like heart rate, respiration, sweat from their hands. And really what we're interested in seeing is how these measures are responding to the videos we're showing them. We'll try to measure cognitive empathy, and this really means, is this child pretty good at detecting other people's emotions? We'll measure self-conscious emotions, and we'll also measure emotion regulation.
So we're all on the same page. I always like to just tell you what I mean when I'm using this word emotion, because it is a, vague word in a lot of ways, and people have lots of ideas about it. But when I'm using that term, what I'm really referring to are these very brief states, just a few seconds actually. We think emotions kind of arise in these little waves or bursts, and they're multi-system responses. So when you have an emotion, you have different thoughts come to mind, memories may come to mind, different behaviors become more likely than others, and your face might move in predictable ways. And physiologically, we think that emotions are kind of organizing all these systems in the body very rapidly and helping us to deal with whatever we need to deal with.
When we first tried to publish the study of emotion processing in dyslexia, the field was like, why are you even studying emotions in dyslexia? But it's really fundamental. We know that the majority of kids with dyslexia have at some point anxiety, and if they're not supported, it can become a lifelong problem.
We also know that a lot of the kids that struggle in school will drop out of school. They can be very bright, but they never got the instruction that they needed. And sometimes there's a lot of vulnerability, there's a lot of sadness, there's a lot of anger in some cases. And it's no surprise that some of these kids without other opportunities get involved with juvenile justice and incarceration. A large number of our prison population they can't read. There's 75 to 80% can't read. There's drug use, there's suicide, there's teen pregnancies. A lot of these things you can trace back to how successful they were in school, which comes down to reading.
Many times when families come into my office, they're talking about their students feeling let down. Their confidence is not the same. They don't see that spark. So although it's about learning, what they're really wanting to see is that they see their child again, and that they see in a more traditional setting that something about that process and the way that they're engaging there is taking that away, whether they're not being taught in the way that they need to, or they're having to work so hard academically that they're not able to engage in things where they feel good and shine, and they're able to engage with their strengths. They just come feeling like something's not working and I don't know what it is, and we need to find a place that they can feel good again.
If a student is dyslexic, and they don't get any remediation around that until they get to high school, then they've had a lot of years of school, often with people telling them that they're not good enough or that they're lazy, and so they bring that trauma with them to high school. Whereas if they get that support earlier, like I really think the earlier the better, they can learn to read and then go through middle school and high school at the same rate as their peers because they already have their reading skills in place, so they're avoiding potential years of trauma.
Notice how it's a little bit different than the social emotional learning. So social emotional academic development, what are our academics? That take place at home or at school? School. Usually at school, unless you're doing homework, right? So a lot of times at school, and how you're feeling at school with your emotions and how you're feeling throughout the day, could that affect how well you do in school?
Yeah.
If you're feeling sad, most likely you're going to be in the blue zone. How's your energy level going to be? Really high up?
Low.
Not so much low. What if you're feeling sick?
Low.
You're probably going to be feeling low too. But the main idea is here, each zone has an appropriate place to be in, and there really is no bad zone. It's all about being in control of our feelings. If we're way out of control, we're just a little bit out of control.
We're going to go down and see a middle school classroom right now. Today, what they're going to be working on is kind of connected to the value circle. And those are those 6 principles and character traits and values that we want people to show on our campus, students, teachers, and faculty. And the ones that we think will really transcend into society for people to be successful. So they're gonna be sitting in a circle, according to the teacher, and talking a little bit about where they currently are in life, who they currently are in life, and then kind of projecting out, like 1 year, 3 year, 5 years, 10 years, where do they wanna be? How are they gonna see themselves? And how they're gonna get there.
My question for today is, who and what do you hope, or what do you hope to be like in 10 years? So think about that. You're all gonna be 23, 24.
I think in 10 years, I'd probably want to be more self-confident than I am currently, because I just question myself a lot and I tend to hesitate more. Anyone else?
Working in the film industry, that seems like it would be fun. And also archaeology.
Ooh, okay.
When we talk about the student support team, it's everyone. And really the students are part of that team. I mean, they're the ones that lead that team because they're the ones that should be telling us how they're feeling, what their experiences are, what they want their experiences to be, and how those interactions should go. So we take the lead from them, but also needing to meet certain expectations, you know, the values that we have at our school and expectations that other people might have for them. And we help guide that journey for them, but it's definitely the students. It's the people here that can support them, but then most importantly, it's the family. You know, other than the student, the family knows their child better than anyone.
I first noticed that that something was different in Oliver in kindergarten. And I attended a back-to-school night event at my child's kindergarten classroom where I learned about the teacher's instructional methodology. And what these children were being taught was a cueing system. Basically, they were being taught to guess. And I saw that my child was coming home each day with a short book. And it was very obvious to me that he wasn't reading, he was memorizing the words and reading them back to me. So I started asking questions and raising my concerns, but at that time I was told to just wait, that it was too early to really test for dyslexia. I'm familiar with dyslexia because I have family members who have it, and I know, what that the signs and struggles are. So I continued to press them for testing, and I was put off. And eventually I ended up hiring a private advocate to help me navigate the system, and she directed me to a neuropsychologist who was able to provide a private assessment of my child's learning differences. And that assessment was so comprehensive and complete that it really gave me a very holistic view of my child's brain and how he can learn best. So with that information, it enabled me to push the school for more and more interventions. But we got to a point where what they were offering and what they were providing, it just didn't work. It wasn't working, and it was causing a lot of anxiety, a lot of just exhaustion for me and for my child.
Universal screening is important in kindergarten and first grade to determine which students might struggle to learn to read. We can find this out as early as kindergarten and first grade, and then students will have the intervention that they need early on, starting right away in the reading process.
Special education services are only provided to students who are identified with a disability. And so whether that disability be autism spectrum disorder, whether it be a behavioral disorder or a learning disability like dyslexia, for example. And so there are gatekeepers to those services. And the primary mechanism by which students receive access to those services is through a comprehensive evaluation and through identification with a disability. The problem with that sort of system that's oriented towards eligibility is that it often results in a wait to fail approach, where students have to progress through grade 2, grade 3 before their problem becomes so significant that they're going to qualify for special education services. And by that time, it's often later than we would like for intervention purposes. The way that I tend to talk about it is that we will identify a learning disability, and that would provide some civil protections that a student might be entitled to as a student with a learning disability. But the instructional services, the interventions that the child is going to receive, should never be contingent upon that eligibility decision.
But a California or a Texas or another large state, they're important for a reason that a lot of people don't appreciate. They actually tend to dictate what it is that the curriculum developers and the textbook publishers and digital curriculum developers, what they're going to be developing towards. Because if you're putting together a curriculum, do you try to meet the California standards with its 6.5 million students, or do you meet a much smaller state that maybe has 200,000 students? Well, the answer is pretty clear. You're looking to what is California's requiring, what is Texas requiring, what is Florida requiring, what is New York State requiring.
We're getting a lot of interest from many other countries because with our screener projects that is called Multitudes, we are creating the tool also in Spanish. And so we've been approached by other countries who have Spanish as first language that might want to use the screener. And since it was developed with public money from the state, we are excited that we might be able to share it worldwide and not just to California, and increase the impact that it can have.
We want to make sure that we're building something that can be used as early as kindergarten, maybe one day even sooner than that, can be given universally, so every single student can be assessed. And the assessment is not really just about reading difficulty, but it's also meant to assess what are the strengths of that specific student. And this is something very important for us because we do know from the neuroscience and from the work we're doing in the lab that every single weakness in the brain comes with strengths. And those strengths are very important for the teacher because when you know the strength of a child, then you can better teach to that child in a way that is appropriate for that specific kid.
I'm really excited that the unbiased data that we are collecting through our various initiatives comprising the multitude screeners in all public schools in California will really inform science-based approaches and intervention that will benefit all children.
In recent years, we've seen a lot of legislative progress towards processes mandating screening, mandating progress monitoring, tiered interventions, but I think there's been less attention to ensuring that there's high-quality instruction going on in schools. And that's the area, at least in my work with schools, that schools really do struggle the most, is providing high-quality, systematic, and explicit instruction for kids who are at risk or who are at risk for reading difficulties.
There are two places education decisions are made, the most critical ones for our children. First, teachers making millions of decisions every day in the classroom. The second, though, is elected officials who will decide what kind of decisions those teachers can make, what kind of funding policies there are, where is the allocation of resources. So that's why I've always said it's critically important that we understand that education, particularly in the United States, is a political process. I spent 18 years in the U.S. Congress, so the federal government can have an important voice. But let's also remember something. Federal government contributes only 10% of all the funds that are spent in K-12 education. But the bulk of it comes state and local. And so that's why I think it's very, very important to recognize the importance in working at the local and state levels. The best example of that is the state of Mississippi. They undertook a comprehensive approach to infuse the science of reading into their teacher training, their teacher development, into their classrooms. And today, a decade later, the state of Mississippi is now one of the nation's best performers in terms of improving literacy skills for all of its students. And so research that stays on the shelf in the laboratory, useless. Research that gets translated and stays in a book on somebody's shelf, not very helpful. Research that actually gets implemented and used in a meaningful way in a classroom has an impact, and then that impact in turn is felt in the community. And it's felt through quality of life, it's felt through juvenile justice, it's a civil rights issue. All of this can be a direct impact of research moving to the community.
It's so important for us to have this relationship with UCSF because as they learn new information from their research about cognition, about learning, then we can use that information to inform our instruction in the classroom. If it works, we can then redesign that intervention for a larger population of students and teach the teachers in our training institute so that they can implement it in public schools.
The thing that we're very, very passionate about right now is taking all of that neuroscience learning, all of the evidence-based practices, and going into the public school system and teaching them how to do what we do. Give them every bit of the learnings that we've validated in our school and help them have some shortcuts in having some of the same results with their students. So bringing education, research, and the public school commitment, wrapping those all together, we think that that really is the key to how we can address this in a scalable way in California.
So my name's Megan Sanchez. I work for Chartwell Teaching Institute, and I'm a teacher training consultant. Today I'm going to Lad Lane Elementary, and it's a public school in Hollister, California. Teaches K through 7th grade, and I'll be modeling some structured literacy lessons for teachers there to get some ideas on best practices and some different strategies to learn through their class.
Thank you. So cute. So cute. Oh, yeah, exactly. How are you? Good. Beautiful. Okay. And group show. Yep. Amazing. Yep. Thank you so much. And then we'll be popping in and out and you have your own. I know. Yeah. So, yeah. Thank you. Okay. Thank you. All right. I'll walk you guys downstairs. Perfect. Yeah, that's the way. I'll see you guys in a bit. My name is Megan. Nice to meet you all. Oh, thank you, dear. I like to do sounds first because sounds make up words. And whenever we work on our words, it's really important that we use our whole arm and our 2 fingers to build the words in the sky. Okay? Let's go ahead and do this one together. Where's that? You, umbrella, up. Yes.
I know it.
Nice. B. Good. When we say b, we want to clip it, because if we say it too long, we're actually adding another sound, right? Nice. O. Yeah, it was great going into all your classrooms today, meeting your students and getting to see, how your classrooms are set up. And we just want to use this time to kind of talk about and debrief the lessons that you saw. For me, the structured literacy lessons, and discuss anything you noticed, anything you have questions about. You can just kind of take it from there.
I was really surprised at how much time you spent, but I saw the value of it once you were doing it. How much time you spent with the writing. Really having them draw it in the air, and then you went around and made sure that they were, because that's kind of something I typically kind of speed through to get to the writing. But if you think about it, that's part of it. So the B's, you did the capital B. Yeah, so that was something I'll probably spend a little bit more time on.
I'm doing the things that you're doing, so that's so really good. And I like just some of the exercises you did with reading from the workbooks, how you did the different activities, like the waterfall.
It goes back to what Maria was saying of keeping it novel, right? Trying to make it interesting. So yeah, we did whisper read a word, read to your partner, choral read all together, and then waterfall is a fun one. So if there's a column of 5 words, the first student will read the word, the next student reads the first word and the second word, the third student reads the first, second, and third, and so on. So you're really encouraging students to, 1, listen to what their peers are saying, making sure that they're ready and focused, and you're getting them to have a lot of repetition with reading the words over and over again.
Bud.
Nice work. Great. Why don't you try writing Bud? That is the name of someone, right? When we write someone's name, we use uppercase letters. So yeah, I just wrapped up today. I went to 10 different classes, working with students all the way from kindergarten to 5th grade, and did 25 minutes lessons in each class. And some I worked on handwriting. Others I was working on sounding out individual words and spelling words during spelling dictations. And it was awesome getting a chance to work closely with the teachers. And we just finished our debrief discussing with teachers what they took away from the demo lessons today. And I know it varies district by district, but I feel like Hollister District overall has seen the value of the implementation of structured literacy and starting at a young age. Glad Lane in particular has chosen this structured literacy curriculum called PAF, and they use it across the board with every single grade. So there's a lot of consistency, there's repetition, they have these classes, they meet for 25 minutes every single day, really trying to make sure they stick to fidelity in the structured literacy way. What we realize is that some students that have been doing structured literacy for several years are not improving by focusing on phonetics and sounds alone and syllables. And that a strength, especially for students with dyslexia, is their focus on semantics or the meaning of words. And that's what morphology is. We're focusing on taking a word you don't know and looking for parts that contain meaning. And so when you start teaching students very explicitly these prefixes, these suffixes, and these Latin roots in particular for emergent bilinguals who already have so much language and vocabulary knowledge in their home language, they're able to, one, make connections to their home language, and they're able to start seeing these prefixes and suffixes in so many other words.
In our Chartwell Teaching Institute, we have individual teachers come from schools, tutors, private schools, and public schools. We've also partnered with whole districts and trained all elementary school teachers in general education and special education this approach so they can support the reading instruction in their school.
Finish those. You can certainly add a few more.
Not many teachers in their educational programs have learned how to teach phonics, and they are very excited to learn that and bring it to their classroom.
I've worked in the same program for 15 years, and I'm working with students with emotional disturbance. Students are typically with me during their 6th, 7th, and 8th grade years, and our program is a therapeutic-based program. And as a special education teacher for as long as I have been, I wasn't really aware of this huge need to bring back the foundations, to talk about how letters are, how they sound, and really bring about that awareness that you got to start at that foundational level, and it's not too late when they've come to middle school or even high school.
As I look at the scores in Napa County and throughout California, it's shocking that we do not have the majority of our kids being able to read proficiently. We came down here and we watched classrooms and we were very impressed. But then I walked away and I said, that's very nice, but these are very small classes. So how does this translate to what you would do in a typical public school? I'm seeing 6 or 8 kids in a class, and in a public school you're going to see 25, 30, or 35 kids in a class. Then they took us to R.O. Hardin School in Hollister, which has implemented this program. And I saw that with the right leadership and the right way of structuring classes, each kid could get 1 hour on a daily basis of reading instruction tailored to his level with a very heavy emphasis on phonics.
Hey there, come on in, welcome. Good morning, I'm well, it's good to see you. Thanks for coming. I'm the youngest of 3, and so I have an older brother who's an assistant principal, and then a sister who's also in education. She's She works for the Head Start program. So my dad is, he immigrated into the US, I think in his early 20s. And he landed, of course, I guess in LA, and then made his way into Hollister. And so worked the fields out here, and so for many years. And then my mom, she passed just 2 years ago, an avid reader, and definitely just a person that I think has definitely molded myself, my brother, my sister. From there, I think that my dad felt that he really needed health benefits and a job that would provide that for him. He began to work for our school district, and he was the custodian. So, and he became the custodian of the school where I am now principal. So I've been running the halls now of R.O. Hardin ever since I think I was 6-7 years old. And when I applied for my current job, one of the things that I did was I brought my school folder, my cumulative folder, and it has all of the pictures of just when I started kindergarten all the way up through 8th grade. We still do this for our students, and so yeah, we have all of our pictures. We just picked up my daughter's, and so hers looks much the same way. And then in here, this is what we call a home language survey. Which language did your son, daughter learn when they first began to speak? For me, it was Spanish. And what language does your daughter most frequently use at home? Spanish. What language do you most frequently speak to your son, daughter? Spanish. And the language most often spoken to the adults at home, by the adults at home, and it's Spanish. And then my mom signed it. You know, this is what the home language surveys look like at R.O. Hardin. And so it's a treasure, I think, now, because it does, I think now it serves as a reminder of, you know, exactly where our students sit and what my job is, and to ensure that they have the same opportunities that I've had, and they're capable, just as I think I was, of doing better.
R.O. Hardin has been a school that has been in our district. It's our oldest school in our district, but historically it has been the lowest performing school in our district. Something different had to happen here for students, because we were still working hard, but we weren't getting the results that we were wanting. And so we decided to work with Chartwell and begin that journey of being able to give our students the opportunity to gain the literacy skills just as their students were doing. And so we went with the structured literacy approach, got all of the research behind it, understanding why it works. And so as a staff, we went through that whole entire process together, and then beginning to make that adjustment to our instruction. And we did that little by little.
Go ahead and start reading.
Dan didn't have to go to school. He got up at sunup to get fishing. He was singing and he rushed to the dock.
Long ago, all the birds living in the forest were black, white, or black and white.
Weekly, what we do is to be able to keep up with adjusting student levels or their needs. So part of that is to be able to gauge where they are in their reading skills. So right now we're doing, it's a fluency assessment, so how it is that the student is progressing with reading fluency. So we just finished our progress monitoring, so that's done weekly, and so now this piece is the fluency part.
If you look online, Kinder Fluency is 10 words per minute. Over here at HPS, they do 50. So we're doing kind of in the middle.
So like the little
She
one that's
just
here,
did 35 words per minute, which is great.
Great.
Yeah. What did he do? 37?
37.
Just about the same.
Yeah, they're in the same group.
Yep. Yep. No matter the learning style, no matter if they struggle or don't struggle, it works for everybody. And I feel like sometimes some of the teachers that haven't totally bought into this system, the science of reading and teaching this way, they feel like it goes too slow. But what I've noticed is, maybe it goes a little slow in the beginning, but they're learning every skill they need to learn, so that when those words do get harder and when they get into those multisyllabic words, they can go back to what they learned in the beginning and break it up. So it's a little slow in the beginning, but it's going to help them in the long run when they're in 3rd, 4th, 5th grade. They've got all those word attack skills that I didn't used to teach. So I'd have kids that would do well for a while, and then boom, it got to the point where they didn't have the skills to attack those words. So I think it works for every kid.
While we see the full picture of every single student, what they're walking in with, language, their social emotional pieces, their family and their family struggles maybe, we know that when they do take the state exam, while we value the information we get from it, we also recognize that it's just a snapshot of where the student is maybe in that moment. But it definitely does not measure the work that's been done for that student. The moment that they stepped on here will take them where they are, and they're going to grow. We're confident with that.
I had a first grader who I tested on proficiency test 3, which is where her level is with my group, but I feel she could move up, so we tested her on proficiency test 5 and she did great. So she will be moved out of my group and move up on levels.
We've definitely seen a lot of progress. It's like our kindergartners too. It's fun to see. They came in, the majority of them came in without even knowing most of their letter names and sounds, and now they're reading. Some of them are reading at a first grade. Some are, we have 2 reading at a 2nd grade level, so pretty nice.
Come up with something better and more efficient than words.
Working with high school students who have lived with the trauma of not reading for most or all of their lives is a very different animal than a young student. And so how can we connect these skills that involve literacy to help our students become safe, employed, and housed? If you bring it to them with this connection that this will allow you to become independent, I think changes the game and gets their buy-in. So taking apart any kind of vocational instruction and adding that literacy component, I think is magical, and I would love to see our public school system do more of that.
Driving through these streets brings me back to moments in my life that part of me wants to forget. It was just my mom with us, with me and my siblings. I remember not having food at times and not having, my mom not being able to provide for us. I remember seeing my mother cry and not knowing or understanding why she was crying, but it was the pressure that she was facing of not having enough money to pay the rent or buy food for us. There's a specific time I remember when all she had was flour to make tortillas, and she had me ask the neighbor for a cup of beans so that we can accompany the tortillas with, because we didn't even have that. I think, like, how did we not have, like, even frijoles? Like, how did we not have beans at the house? My mother became really ill when I was 12 years old, and so she couldn't work, she couldn't do anything. So we experienced homelessness. We ended up applying for an organization here that supported families to be able to like have an affordable housing apartment, and we were on the wait list for that. And I remember at 12 years old calling every day, like, are we next in line to be able to get an apartment? Are we next in line? Are we next in line? It was just a constant, like, you know, all of the responsibilities shifted upon me. I had to step up. My mother would always give me advice. She'd always tell me that, you know, I needed to work, I needed to go to school. She taught me how to do good, even when no one's looking.
I met Mirel when she was in the 8th grade. She was dealing with severe family trauma and responsibility. 8th graders shouldn't have to go through that. And because of her life situation, she stopped going to school. And here you have a young woman who should have been in an honors program, and she's in a truancy abatement program. So we started a middle college program. We put her in college while she was in high school and started a couple classes here, a couple classes there.
If I take a class, I'm able to then get triple the credits in high school. And then that means that I'm gonna graduate sooner, and I need to graduate school because I wanna be able to get school out of the way so I don't get my mom in trouble with the court. I wanted to graduate and work at a packing company so I could work full time and make money.
Good morning, Rancho Cielo. How may I help you?
Hi, this is Mirel Mejia.
Do you need me to open the gate for you?
Yes, please.
Yes, of course. Just a moment.
Thank you.
Thank you.
And Joe DeRusi registered me for college. I remember taking my first class at Hartnell. It was from 6 to 9 o'clock or 8:50, 6 to 8:50. And I would sit there. I was an 8th grader sitting at a college course. I didn't know what to expect. I just took a notebook, a pencil. I would take note of everything the teacher was, or the professor was explaining. And I passed that class. And it wasn't just one class, it was 2-3 classes per semester that I would take at Hartnell that allowed me to be able to then graduate earlier from high school. And so I was able to graduate at 16. I remember, you know, the conferences my mom would attend when I was a child was like, she was always told, Mirel is very hyperactive, she's always moving, she's always talking, she's not successful, she's not good at reading, she's not good at math. And so when I was able to take this class and get a passing grade, I felt like I've never felt before. And I realized I really loved learning. I had a love for learning that I never discovered until that moment. So when I graduated high school, Joe came around and also said, hey, like, you probably should go to college. Like, I'll help you. You've already been taking classes. This will allow you to be more successful, get a different job, maybe not work in the field or a packing company, but then be able to, you know, have a career. Then I was able to transfer out to CSU Monterey Bay, where I obtained my Bachelor's of Arts in Liberal Studies with a minor in Human Development. And I was able to then go into a credential program that allowed me to be able to teach at a local school here in Salinas. And so that experience allowed me to be financially stable, and something I've never had in my life before. Something I'd say to my younger self is that everything's gonna be fine. And regardless of the situation that you are currently experiencing, there's a purpose in your life, and you're gonna be successful, and you're gonna be able to reach all the things that you put your mind to.
We barely opened the door for her, and she kicked right through it. And for me, as an educator, to see her far surpass what I had done in academia and then has a young person come back and work in our institution with amazing success to not just train our teachers, but train our students on the mission. It was just so inspirational to so many of us.
So when we focus on education and workforce development, literacy is no doubt at the center of that, which is why we've tackled this with such acute focus, starting with reading and writing and English-based communication literacy. We started with reading. That's how we brought Chartwell in, to provide professional development to our teachers. But we're also finding that math literacy is extremely important, and that math really drives the world in numbers, and that many people speak that language and they're not aware of that. And so getting more focused on math literacy has been a huge focal point. I was a math teacher. I really see the value in that, obviously. It sits at the center of everything we're doing. And then financial literacy is something that we've invested heavily into.
For the majority of our students, they qualify under what's called a specific learning disability, and that can affect them in the area of reading, writing, or mathematics. You know, these students have gone through their whole life hiding the fact that they can't read from others, from their teachers, from their friends, because to be honest, it's very embarrassing for them. But I know that they can't read and they know that they can't read, so I just put it out on the table and I just let them know, hey, I know you can't read, you know you can't read, and what we are doing here is we are going to teach you how to read. From there, I asked them, why do you want to read? You know, I've had kids give me answers from, because I want to be able to be in the classroom without feeling embarrassed. I want to be able to, I know that when I go to work, I'll have to be able to read. Some days I might take a girl out on a date and I want to be able to read the menu. And if I can, it will be very embarrassing for me. Those are all reasons that I use to help them reinforce why they want to read.
I used to struggle with reading and writing because my handwriting is sloppy. I couldn't read at all. And ever since I came to Rancho, they helped me read. Before I even came to Rancho, I was like the quiet kid. I didn't talk. I wouldn't talk to no one. I would just stay to myself. And ever since once I got used to the coming here, I was able to actually express myself. I was actually able to talk to my peers, my staff here. I was actually able to communicate more because I was just too scared to communicate how I really felt.
After I graduate, I want to start my 2 years at Harnell, and then from there I want to transfer out to a university and keep, hopefully I major in psychology.
And that really is the quintessential message here, is helping individuals earn a living wage. It's identifying those areas academically that you need to build up. It's identifying those areas that you're strong in. It's lifting those areas up in that individual. Personal human connection across the board, making sure that we're mentoring and finding out as much as possible about each student. It's an approach to creating a culture in which every person who walks in the door has a chance to be successful.
My dad's from Georgia, my mom's from Germany. They moved out here to Marina, California, and lived in Fort Ord because of the military base. I have a brother, I have a sister. I'm the youngest. My mom and dad always worked. My dad worked 2 jobs. Always, my mom was a hard worker. You know, I learned that I don't take it as a sad moment. I take it as a learning situation, as in, not every day is Disneyland, right? You have to work for it, and you have to build that lifestyle you want, right? And my mom told me, hey, if you want to have your own house, if you want to have your own things, if you want to, live the way you want to live, you have to earn that. And with that mindset and seeing the environment around me, also start to lose confidence in being able to live the way I wanted to live, because, my neighborhoods, not too many people had opportunities to go to college. It was all pretty much based upon, we're here, make the most out of it, do little street crimes and stuff like that. That's kind of was the norm for my community. We didn't really have much faith in, like I said, making it to college, have the opportunity to go to college. It wasn't, not many of us at all that was able to get a scholarship, right? And I knew my parents, my family, we didn't have the means to support a college tuition, right? To correct that for me, being a knucklehead, I thought, doing crimes was to make up for it to where I could have my own money and things such in that nature. But when I was, 16, 17, I got incarcerated, went to juvenile hall. Me and a couple of my peers committed a crime and got incarcerated for a whole year. We weren't committed to dedicating ourselves to hard work, right? We didn't want to, wake up early to go to school. We didn't want to complete the assignments. We didn't want to listen to anybody, right? I miss graduating high school, right? My high school football team won a championship, CCS championship. Everybody's going crazy. I'm hearing about it from all my boys, my family. My mom telling me about it and, talking to my coach the whole time I'm incarcerated. And I'm like, man, these guys really won a championship out there, out of the whole county, right? Representing for us. And I'm in here incarcerated, right? And I knew, with those type of accolades, it kind of inspired and motivated me because I know if I put the work in, I could definitely succeed with whatever I believe in, right? And that's where I kind of shifted my dedication and goals.
Investing into high quality education that is meaningful, that is individualized, that is holistic in its approach is a universal concept, and you can never go wrong investing in education and workforce development. That is something that every state, every county, every country in the world can focus on, and you're never going to go wrong with doing that well.
I graduated high school inside juvenile hall, and I came home and went straight to Martin Peninsula College. I remember my mom picked me up. I was on an ankle bracelet. I met Joe DeRusi there. He hooked me up with classes, got me enrolled, gave me a book voucher to get books, and he told me, hey, man, the rest of the work is up to you. And I understood that education can lead to various opportunities, widespread opportunities, to where it opens doors to not only be successful, but also experience new things in life, meet new people. And I knew that, if I ball out, go hard in football, it'll give me the opportunity to get a scholarship to go to a college. And that's what I was able to do. Thankfully, put the hard work in, and I was able to get a full-ride scholarship to San Diego State from Martin Peninsula College. I attended San Diego State for 2.5 years, and that was a blessing. Education was my lifeline to excel in life for me. Football definitely prepared me for the work that it takes studying and helping others, right? Being a role model, because during that whole time, kids are looking at you, looking how you did it. They want to be in the same spot that you were in. They want to be able to earn a scholarship, right? Make their family proud. I could have been a coach after playing football. I played football professionally for 10 years, but I know that this is a purpose in my life. I feel like this was a purpose in my life, giving back to the youth and providing the opportunities and the education to our youth, just to help motivate them on what they want to do and want to be when they grow up.
One of the things I've learned about government that limits its ability to do things that make sense is it generally operates on a one-year budget. Now in business, if we have a factory and we know we can invest in a piece of equipment and it'll save us a lot of money in the long run, we will always invest in that. But the state doesn't do that because they only look at the budgets for 1 year, and often we do not make these investments that pay off in the long run. That's important because in this context, prevention and early intervention strategies, doing those has a massive return on investment. It isn't even close. That every one of them pays off financially and in terms of people's journey, because it costs so much money when people fail in the system and for themselves and for their families, and government is the entity that's there to try to pick up the pieces.
We have a very broad mission. We call ourselves a mission with a school, not a school with a mission, and our goal is to help impact as many children as possible, to help all of them reach their potential. So we could be considered open source in a way. We share our scope and sequence, our curriculum, we invite people in to watch. We give presentations for free to help schools get inspired, and that's why we've been able to ramp up so quickly. We've had other states come to us and ask us if we would consider doing the literacy plan for their state. It's surprisingly less complicated than people think it is.
Getting involved is very important, and that doesn't mean you have to be involved in a campaign, but write that letter. Invite a state legislator to come to your school.
You wonder as a parent, are you doing something wrong? Like, is it something that you're maybe not providing your kid that you should be? And, it was really tough. I had to check myself. I grew up in a military home where you did things a certain way. You were expected to function a certain way. And I had to reevaluate my approach to working with her because I realized that wasn't a way that she connected with. It actually turned it off rather than made her step up like I was hoping it would. You think sometimes if you're stern, if you're strong, if you really take an assertive, position, that your child will step up and correct him or herself, and not every kid responds that way.
So one thing we don't talk about enough is the financial reality of raising a child who has learning differences. Not all parents have the wherewithal to be able to navigate the system with support, to pay for private tutors, to pay for private assessments, and to send their children to specialized private schools. This challenge places a lot of burden on families, and I hope that this can open up a conversation more widely about how we can support all types of learners in every school.
We're fortunate to have the resources, but it is challenging. I mean, for a school like this, you get what you pay for, so that's how we rationalize it. There isn't an equal of a school like this in our area, so we have to make cuts in other areas to make it affordable for us to send our daughter here.
I really grappled with anger in the beginning because this is a school that is fantastic, and there's so many kids that would benefit from a school like this that simply can't afford it. So there was a part of us that was almost felt guilty because she had friends at her old school that 100% could benefit from this, but just financially did not have the means. Even with the best of scholarships, they couldn't make this work.
Knowing what the tuition was, we ended up asking a family member for some support, some help. And that, we were able to make the first year work, and then my dad died, and so we were able to use a little bit of money that he left, and I can't think of a better way to honor his legacy than using that to help his grandson stay here. Now that's why we're working with the school district, hoping that they'll help us because we can't continue to pay this.
There are ways that the public school system will try to address kids like our son's needs. I've been told that it can be quite expensive to do that. In fact, even more expensive for some public schools to create a kind of custom program to meet a kid with severe dyslexia's needs compared to actually the cost of a year at Chartwell. And so one of, I think, the public policy questions that's on my mind is, would society be better off by actually potentially taking those public tax dollars and actually helping kids come to a school like Chartwell?
I worked with the Boston Consulting Group, which is a leading business group, to study this issue of what is the cost to the state of California not addressing dyslexia. So they did this exhaustive study. It was pro bono. They spent $1 million on the study. They turned loose all their hotshot MBAs, and what they discovered was that the state of California was costing the state about $13 billion annually by not addressing dyslexia in all of the costs in the system downstream. And for this next generation, it will cost the state of California $1 trillion, which begs the question, why do we not invest in that to save all that money And again, the answer is that structurally, it's very hard for government to make these kind of investments.
It is critically important to have the kind of ground-up initiatives that we've been talking about with Chartwell School, with Hollister School District, with the UCSF partnership, the Teacher Training Institute. That's showing what can be done, and it's generating results. But we want to see it on a wide scale. We want to see it statewide across California. We want to see it across the United States. And the way you do that is you take the ground-up initiative here, the ground-up initiative here, and now you're beginning to be able to show that legislator, that member of Congress, the governor, whomever, you're beginning to show that there's a solution. And when I show you the solution, now we can talk about how we make sure that solution is implemented on a wide scale.
I think when people see the results of this being done, you reach a critical mass, which we're already fast approaching, then they get the inspiration. There is nothing about this model that can't be replicated. There's nothing about it that can't be rolled out in other geographic areas, and there's no reason why their results should be any different.
Effective education allows the brain to develop in a healthy way, and developing a healthy brain is fundamental for an individual's healthy life. So it's not just a matter of academic achievement and test scores and college admittance, but it's really a brain health issue.
The biggest motivator of change, and we've seen this with the dyslexia population, are mostly mobs of angry moms. The angry moms really drive this. They are the one that feel the pain of their children failing in the school system, and they're the ones who have really driven the change in California, initially in 2016 to recognize dyslexia, and more recently to demand that it's a condition that requires universal screening.
We need more parents to step up and to speak out and to tell their stories so that we can get much more momentum behind this. I think in the past we've maybe as parents have been not wanting to stigmatize our kids and talk about this. We know our kids are bright, and sometimes the word dyslexia hasn't been understood, but it comes with an inordinate amount of strengths. And if we're embracing the whole child and we're telling these stories, we will make it happen even faster.
Keep pushing through, don't give up. My mom always says grit is the big thing that got me through everything. And grit is all about just pushing through in the hard times, and it helps you get through.
Taking the pen and putting it to paper was just the hardest thing in the world.
Gary's like a father in my life, the father I've never had.
We reached the lowest pedestal in life, being incarcerated, so we're going to go full throttle and try to reach the stars.
Let us have access to books. Let us partner with our communities.
Let us come together.
Let us teach.
Let us show you that we can.
Let us read.